So pursuant to Governor Baker's March 12, 2020 order suspending certain provisions of the Open Meeting Law, General Law, Chapter 30A, Section 18, and the Governor's March 15, 2020 order imposing strict limitation on the number of people that may gather in one place. This meeting of the Hubbardston Finance Committee will be conducted via remote participation to the greatest extent possible. Specific information and the general guidelines for remote participation by members of the public and/or parties with a right and/or requirements to attend this meeting can be found on the town website. We post that with the agendas, as you see here. No in-person attendance of the meetings will be permitted, but every effort will be made sure that the public can adequately access the proceedings in real time here on Zoom. In the event that we are unable to do so, despite best efforts, we will post on the town's website a comprehensive record of proceedings as soon as possible after the meeting. This will be available on the main page of the Town of Hubbardston website under meeting videos.
Okay, great. Thank you, Ryan.
Can almost do that by heart.
I bet. All right, so everybody got the minutes. If everything is in order, can I have a motion to approve them both?
I'll make a motion.
Okay,
I'll second it.
all right. Any conversation? Any mistakes? Nope. Okay, great. Everybody in favor?
Aye.
We have to do a roll call, right?
Oh.
To do a roll call thing?
Has to be a roll call. Yep.
Okay, so Josh?
Yes.
All right, Shannon?
Yes.
Chuck?
Yes.
Maria?
Yes.
Me? Susan Rain, yes. Okay, it's unanimous. Thank you. All right, Ryan, it's all yours. What's the report?
All right. So I have three things essentially for you. I have the Q3 financial report, which is the last pretty one we're going to have for a while.
Yeah.
And then pretty I use loosely, but definitely better than what's coming. FY20's just some analysis for you guys to discuss and give me some input on. And FY21 budget, which I'm sure everyone's thrilled to hear about. So
Yep. Okay.
I will go through the report, this report that I put on your screen quickly. Everyone can see the Q3 financial report.
Yes.
Okay, so you're familiar with this document. I'm gonna, if I'm going fast, just stop me. A lot of this is repetitive, so I'm only getting to the new stuff.
Okay.
So the budget versus actual is a report that we send out every month, and every department, board, committee, anyone who has a budget is to review this. Currently, we're through March 31st, so this report that's attached here would cover 75% of our expected expenses. So what I do is highlight any line item that's over that 75% expectation. A lot of the times it's because of the timing of bills or other things, but there is a section in this report that talks about the different things that we're monitoring. So I'm only going to stop to talk about stuff that you haven't heard or needs an update. So assessing services, it was a one-time fee in order to upgrade our GIS, $800 that they're going to be able to cover internally. So it won't be something that causes a lot of concern, but it is over appropriation. Information technology services. So I'm pretty sure we're going to be okay in this line item. When I say pretty sure, I'm 95% sure, as long as nothing comes up or we don't need any capital. And this pays for our software, our computers, and our computer services, anything dealing with our IT. Building maintenance services, you all are very aware that the senior center, the Slade building has been a bit of a money pit this year. Some of the stuff we did because it was opportunistic, some of it because it broke. And then of course, COVID-19 hit and we started doing a lot more sanitation and other things. So you'll see, I expect this to be over, but I don't expect it to be over by a lot. And that's mostly due to the fact that we did transfer from the finance reserve into this account. Okay. Police personnel, that'll be its own discussion. Employee support, employee services, as long as no more cruisers break for the rest of the year, we're good in this line item. not something that can be helped for the most part. Fire services is the same, so kind of a longer update on this one. Engine 3 is in the shop. It's going to cost $4,000 just to look at what's wrong with it, and then it could be anywhere from a very minor fix to a $30,000 fix, and I'll get into that in more detail.
Okay.
Obviously not budgeted for. The dispatch services, this will be its own conversation as well. Just the DPW details, they're starting to do details again. This was already in the negative. They can cover it internally, but the budget did have more money for details. It's about 10,000 off where it should be. So we have a plan to add $1,000 for the next 10 years.
Why is that?
It's just not something that's budgeted for or hasn't been budgeted for. So we have to pay our police officers to serve on those details. So it's an intergovernment transfer between two departments, and it just never was properly funded.
Okay.
So it was eaten up by something like services, et cetera, but I've tried to get I have gotten with Travis a better handle of expenses in the DPW to make sure that we can transparently track it.
Okay.
So we can cover it by not doing other things, but it's never been adequately funded.
Okay.
So the classic 10-year plan to fix that, which viruses tend to throw out of whack.
Yeah.
The rest of it is known. So overall, the operating budget, remember, this is through Q3. So only about a week of COVID at this point.
Right.
The department's expended 72.9% of available funds. Historically, there's a 1% jump, so a 26% expenditure in Q4. So this isn't unexpected. So we expected at one point to return somewhere between 100 to 200,000 in funds unspent, which is our target. It's something that we hope for, because that allows our free cash number to be where it is this year, which is about 5% of our overall operating budget, because we rely heavily on free cash, not only for operating, but for capital. So given some of the numbers I'll show you in the Q3 and 4 analysis, it's fair to assume that the turnbacks will be somewhere closer to 100 and maybe even 50, which will lower our free cash number for next year quite a bit. And some of that is more police expenses, more public safety, and more sanitation. The good news on that is we're pretty sure that's going to be eligible for some MEMA and FEMA grants, and we might get some of that back. It won't hit our coffers for a couple years,
Okay.
a year or two.
Okay.
So what I've done to sort of address what you can see is a little bit of a problem is basically did a spending freeze for any non-essential items. Our warrants have dropped down to, mostly because we don't have employees in the offices either, but our spending is frozen unless it goes through me. We've recorded all of our COVID-19 expenses, and every department's been told they need to fund their overages through themselves first before we start transferring money around. So next section is some of these accounts. So IT, we really pushed this budget to try and get that Windows 7 upgrade done. So that's why this one is right to the max. We also added some software like in the building department, all accounted for. We had to spend a little bit of money to upgrade, and when I say a little bit, like $1,000 to upgrade people for remote working, et cetera. So that's why this budget's so stressed. Again, I don't think it's going to go over. Just watching it. We talked about the details. We talked about the building. Police personnel. So when this stay-at-home order went into place, Chief Perrin advised myself and the Board of Selectmen that based on the stay-at-home order, there would be more civil disruption than usual, which did come into play. We've seen a little bit of, unfortunately, an uptick in domestic violence calls and a lot more patrolling in order to keep social distancing, et cetera. So we're not patrolling and making people stay in their homes. What we're doing is reminding folks and doing a little bit of community policing not to gather in groups of 10 to try and do our part for the governor's order. So that plus 12-man shifts, because we're forcing our officers to not take leave right now. So we need to give them some stability with the 12-hour shifts is causing an intentional overtime, not intentional, but an unavoidable overtime cost.
Mhm.
If we were to do that for the rest of the year, it probably would cost somewhere around $40,000 to $60,000. So we didn't know at the time how long this was going to last. We still don't know how long it's going to last, but we do know that this isn't a sustainable expense, and we've reworked some of the numbers, the chief and I, and the coverages to really analyze which shifts need that additional service and which ones we can back off a little bit. Also, since we're not using leave, we're probably going to have to pay out the leave bonuses. I'm sorry, the leave that's not being used by our officers, unless we want to create a giant liability in FY21. So all that being said, somewhere between 10 and 30,000 is what we're expecting to be over for police services.
Okay.
And the next two that are under is police and fire, both maxed out on fixing their vehicles. So on the fire side, engine 3 was inoperable. They had to tow it to, there's only so many places that do fire engine repair. The one we use happens to be in Rhode Island. It was towed there. In order to get it, the pump operating and to evaluate it, it's going to cost $4,000, which I've authorized. Now the fire department can cover that internally, but the next piece they're not going to be able to cover it all, which is what's it cost to repair. So that could really be something minor, up to a replacement of the water pump, which we don't think is going to happen, but it still should be known. So it could be anywhere from a couple hundred to $30,000 to do that. It's not very specific. I'm not giving you much there, but that's what we're facing.
Okay.
So that's why you see somewhere between, and this fire number's off. I did get an update since this. We're expecting it to be 2 to 30 now. It could be 30, but we really don't think it's a pump replacement. So I think that high end is super conservative. So we're looking at deficits of somewhere between 12 and 50,000, probably settling somewhere in the 30 to 40 range. And I'll show this in Excel form. The expected surpluses. So we will have a healthy turnback in health insurance, dispatch services, retirement services, Monty Tech, snow and ice because of the mild winter. And some good news, our legal fees are way under budget this year, which is good. A lot of
Gee, I wonder why.
controls we put in place are working here.
Good.
We're still getting great counsel, and we're still getting, we're still reviewing everything, but we're not overspending on legal.
Excellent.
So the surplus could be anywhere from 50 to 100, as we talked about before.
Okay.
So then let's talk revenue. This is the last time that we're going to get good news in revenue for a while. So according to most economic measures and municipal reports that I'm getting and seeing internally. So at the time of this report, we'd received 74% of our expected revenue. This would be normal this time of year. We get a little bit of revenue bump at the end of the year from the last tax taking, that's the wrong word for it, the last tax bill coming in, and then also the state pays a lot of its stuff at the end of the year. So we were expecting to be 1 or 2% over our projection for revenue, which combined with the expenses would have given us the free cash target of 400,000 to 500,000 that we were looking for. That's going to change. So you know that everything's shut down. You know that revenue is at a standstill. We have no idea what the end of this year is going to look like. But we've already collected 90, 95, 96% of our revenue. So it could be a problem, but it's not going to be a massive problem. Next year's a problem, but we'll talk about that in FY21.
Right.
Okay, so we can expect a revenue shortage, maybe. And I'm trying, I hate giving you guys maybes. I like giving you better information, but we just don't know. So if you took 100,000 in revenue and you had 50,000 in excess cost, and then we have about 150,000 we think in overages, that means our plus minus is about 0, which is why we're concerned about free cash. Okay, some capital projects, no real changes here. I'll just go through the stuff that has changed. The voting machine has been purchased and paid for. The DPW exhaust fan, we finally had that done or moving, and then the virus hit. The town center project, we're going for that last bit. That's in a really good spot, and we got great news that that we're pretty sure this is going to move from 2023 to 2022. So this could be done, actually constructed in the next couple years, which is a big win. It's moved up 2 years since the initial placement on the tip. The plow truck is already purchased and came in under bid. The roof and skylight is done to standard and is going to return about $5,000. Police cruiser is purchased. Both of the school projects. Our town IT equipment project is complete. The center school roof feasibility study is done, and we'll talk about that a little bit in FY21 stuff. And then CPA stuff is either on its way or there's a reason we didn't do something like this portable ice rink. They never purchased it, so they're going to delay that until next year.
Mhm.
So that's capital, everything we're tracking. A couple projects will be pushed into 21, but overall we had a good year in terms of accomplishing our capital projects. So finance team, the normal Q3 stuff, they helped me finish my budget, reconciled all of our accounts, and we're doing very well keeping to our reconciliation policies, which is good for our annual audit and making sure that there's no internal fraud, et cetera. They helped me refine our revenue projections and really dig through that stuff. Finished our tax title entries into Vadar, which is the last switch we needed to do from the old software. So we're fully into Vadar now, and it's a great system. We're very happy with it. It's done a good thing for our finance team. And then moving to remote has caused the finance team to have to do a lot of one-on-one training with employees. We're used to doing things face-to-face, so I guess it's been a good exercise. If there's any positives out of that on knowing what we can and cannot do in terms of our resilience. So lastly, with our financial monitoring, the cash book is reconciled through February 29th, which is within town policy. Payroll withholdings are through the end of March. Again, all this is within policy. Accounts receivable, February 29th, and ambulance receivables. So this is something that was identified in the audit, as you know.
Right.
We have a large chunk of unpaid medical bills that are on our books for almost 15 years now, and they want us to deal with those liabilities,
Mm-hmm.
those receivables. So a lot of it we can't collect because there's limitations on collection.
Right.
So that can just be washed. The stuff that we can collect it's not only a money decision, it's a political decision. So usually there's a reason why people can't pay their bills, and most of these folks are residents. So it'll be up to the recommendation from this board and the Board of Selectmen how aggressive you want to be with old bills. Some of them very old. Some of these people have passed away, et cetera. And a lot of these folks are our most vulnerable population. So not that you shouldn't pay your bills or that we don't encourage, but these are the bills that are left after all of the stuff. So
Do you have them aged out?
I'm sorry?
Do you have them aged?
Yes. So you'll get a full report on this with what can and cannot happen and what those implications are, hopefully by the end of Q4 or this year.
Okay.
We were working on it quite a bit, and then it's taken a bit of a backseat, but we won't forget about it because it's important.
Okay.
A
What was the
lot of it is
What was the
just
dollar amount? I don't remember.
somewhere the total, which is not something we can expect at all, is 350,000, but most of that is
Okay.
15 years. So
Well, yeah. Oh, geez. All right. Holy crap. All right.
yeah,
All right.
had it been done year to year,
Wow.
we're not the only town to do this, for sure. This is one of those, if you get to it, make sure you fix this type items on the audit. So we like to be
Yeah.
thorough. So.
Yeah. All right.
And the rest of it is the report. So you can look through each account. We also post the summary and the detail on the town website every month under the accountants page. So we're fully transparent, open checkbook on what's being spent.
Okay.
We'll have a few transfers for you, and that'll come in mid-May, early June, as we try and shuffle things around to address some of these issues. So I want to give you this in Excel form as well. Is that too small to see?
No, no, I can see it.
Okay, so on the left side, I'll just walk through these quickly because I already talked about a lot of them. These are things that we expect to be turned back. So this is from town council. This is from supply budgets all throughout the budget. Dispatch, Monty Tech, you can read the names as we go down. So that's 92,000-ish. I think that's conservative. I think there'll be a little bit more, which is good.
Okay.
On the right side, you see overages. So these are the overages that are reported in that report. The ones in white, I'm not worried about at all. The ones in yellow, I'm tracking pretty closely. And the ones in red, I know are going to go over. So that's the Slade building. I have some hope, but it depends on what's left for oil bills, et cetera, which we shouldn't be paying much, but you still got to heat the building.
Yep.
The forced overtimes for the police, the engine 3 for the fire. As you can see, these are all the conservative numbers. We're paying our emergency management director an extra stipend just because of the way he's monitoring and going to get us hopefully a large grant. Then this last one here at the bottom. So we have to send a scuba diver into our water tank at the schools every 3 years. This is one of those 3 years and it wasn't budgeted for. We'd like to pay that not on the town meeting warrant if we can fit it in this year, but that's a discussion for you to let me know what you want to do. So overall, that's 70,000 on the conservative end. So if you take what's left in the FinCom reserve plus the budget, that's about 100. And then if you take out those overages, hopefully we're plus 30. And then those capital turnbacks make us plus 80. And then you got to talk about revenue, where revenue is going to come in short. So if it comes in short, that's the cushion that we have. If it comes in over 100%, which we're still hoping it will, then this will form our free cash for the year.
Okay.
I know that was a lot. Any questions on any of that?
No. No, I'm good.
We were in really good shape before the virus. We had done this committee and everyone had done a really good job. This virus isn't going to destroy our finances, but it's definitely hurting the plan. So
Yep.
there are towns in worse shape. There are towns in better shape. Okay, so that's everything from FY20. I will look at everyone's face and see if anybody has they want any more detail on any of the stuff that we're facing.
Not at this point, no.
No, I'm good.
This
Yeah.
one-
Last year, we didn't really have anything come up. It just kind of sailed through the year. This year, between the vehicles, the Slade building, and then obviously COVID-19, and to still potentially have excess, that's pretty good. Had we not had those things, and obviously you have to have contingencies, but we'd have been right where we were last year. So the plan is still working. We just have to adjust.
Okay. All right.
Okay. Do you want me to do 21 now?
Yes.
Okay, so there's going to be a lot of decisions in 21 that we're going to have to make. So this is all changes from my town administrator's budget, which you're all familiar with at this point. So as you know, we're having a bad revenue projection year. I've increased the free cash back to where it was last year, just because I'm not going to be unreasonable about that. This local aid number. So right now, the state has not adjusted the governor's number. Normally, this state aid number would go up a little bit for us, maybe $5,000, $10,000. Right now, I would say towns are 50-50 on what the state's going to do. So there's some that think that the state's going to use the rainy day fund to make sure that we don't lose our state aid, our Chapter 90, all those things that we're kind of building our budgets on. That's kind of where I'm falling. There's half the state that believes that they're going to cut because of the massive revenue. I mean, the state is more reliant on the economy than the town is for sure. So we're reliant on the state. So we don't know if they're going to cut that number. Let's say they cut it by 10%, we'd be in a lot of trouble. That's 62,000 and a $9 million budget. So I don't think they're going to do that. I think if there is cuts, don't think Hubbardston will feel them that much, but I could be wrong there. So this could be a overly optimistic number, if you will. So then revenue. So when I was talking to you about the town administrator's budget, so what I did, what you're seeing here on the screen, just to remind you, is we took the actual numbers from each revenue category we have over the last 6 years. We threw out the high and the low and created an average. And that was the how we were estimating revenue for FY21. So overall, it put us at 90% of 2019's actual, which is our financial policy. That was where we were driving to get, and we got there in the town administrator's budget. So those numbers were pretty conservative to begin with. So I've taken this revenue and I've probably met with 10 town administrator mentors that I trust, have them look at the numbers too, just to make sure I'm thinking things correctly for this recommendation. So excise, our actual number for motor vehicle excise was 700,000. It was way above what we normally get, which means the economy was doing great. People were buying new cars.
Mhm.
The actual from 18, which was pretty good historically, was 650. We were budgeted at 636, which was pretty conservative based off those two numbers.
Right.
But I'm not comfortable that excise is going to return much this year, if anything. I mean, nobody's going to buy new cars. So I would like to bring us down to 600,000 just to be safe. And that will also help us if other revenue categories don't come in, like property tax. So that's what I've dropped it down to. So it's 100,000 less than 2019. We had projected this to be 650 this year, and we're probably going to hit that, which is what it was in 18. But I do expect this to make a big dip. So the rest of our stuff, I'm not going to recommend that we touch much unless you guys want me to. So the pilots are pretty solid. We have steady partners for our pilots, mostly the state, and they're not going to drop. They might not give us anything new, but they're not going to drop it. The rest of these fees are pretty standard. They're fees that people need to continue to operate their businesses or other things, and those businesses are, I plan this year that they'll still be there. Fees, we're still doing building permits, believe it or not, and other things. Business is still happening, so we already have such low projections in here that I just didn't feel like anything else needed to be cut. Except for when you get down to building permits. So we weren't having a great year with building permits to begin with. We're probably going to be at 30,000. We projected we'd be at 38. And that is much lower than we normally are. We thought there would be a lot of building that happened in FY21. We still think that building's going to happen, but who knows? So I've dropped that basically in half and cut from, we were estimating 50,000 down to 25,000, just to be extra conservative. It shouldn't really change our electrical and plumbing permits that much. So this Board of Health number, I just agreed with the Board of Health to get 80% of all their permit revenues go to the general fund. So we expect this number to come back. Everybody who pulled the health permit in the past has pulled it again. So not worried about that. Ambulance, this was a decent number to begin with, and ambulances are continuing to run. So I'm not as worried about that. And then for miscellaneous revenue. So the reason why this dropped from 33,000 last year is we used to share an assessing assistant with Rutland. It didn't really work out for us. We normally get somewhere between 3,000 and 5,000 in miscellaneous revenue, so it's inappropriate to put nothing there. And then the EDC is selling sponsorships, and it looks like they're still going to be able to do that. So we added an EDC budget, or Economic Development Committee budget, this year, and then added the revenue that they're going to bring in from the signs. So this was already a conservative number, so we're going to keep it there. And then investment income, we thought it would be a great year. We were getting a lot of high returns last year, and if you see our number from 19, it was 14,000. We're just going to be conservative and drop that down. So overall, what that does, it's a $50,000 loss in revenue from last year. So if you take the revenues that we have, which are almost flat from last year, literally we have almost no additional revenue this year, maybe 50 to 70,000. You take the budget, this includes the school's 7.5% number, our deficit is 260,000. Then the rest of this cover sheet, the only thing that changed was I had recommended that we put some money in stabilization. That's obviously out the door. We put that 20,000 back into the free cash, and the selectmen, sorry, this should be 6,000, have agreed with the planning board to pay through town meeting warrant if residents want to for the last master plan chapter, which we applied for a grant for, and we might not even need. Okay, so this, with everything that's in the budget still, if we did all the capital, everything, free cash use in the operating budget, we still have a reserve of 100,000 in free cash, which could end up being the only free cash we have. So we should have some type of reserve of free cash because, again, we don't know what's going to happen. So that's kind of the summary. I'll stop there if there's any questions, and then I can get into some expense side, which I'm sure you're very want to know about.
I'm good.
I'm good.
Ryan, I just had a quick question on some of the projections. I know you had done that method where you looked back to 2014 and threw out the high and the low. Would looking back at, say, some of the like the 2008, 2009 period maybe also be a way of trying to make projections for, say, the upcoming year, just in terms of obviously what economically went on at, I think it was like 2008, 2009, in terms of sort of the local receipts?
So yes, and I can do that. The data that we have, the reason why I stopped at 2000, because I would have done 10 years for sure. The reason why I stopped at 14 was because the data's bad, as we started using software at that point.
Okay.
And I just don't have a strong comfort in the data. This was 100%, I knew it was accurate.
Mm-hmm.
I could spend a lot of time digging in the Department of Revenue for that stuff. I just don't know. I've asked a lot of people that same question because it's a good question. They're not doing it. So doesn't
Okay,
mean
that
that
makes sense. Yeah.
there's just a different type of recession. So we don't know if the lessons will be the same.
Sure.
All right, so let's do expense side. Yay. Maria's like, why did I do the finance committee? Okay, so I'm going to show you the expense thing. So everything in blue is an account where I think we can, I'm not like meaning to just skip through it because I have it broken out for you a little bit more. Everything in blue is things that I think could change without crushing that department. None of these cuts are good. So here we go. Okay, so what's going on this page here, you'll see at the top I have the deficit, the 260,000. So obviously the biggest driver of our deficit is the Quabbin Regional School District. And I'm not saying that to pick on the schools, I'm just saying that increase is historically what squeezes our budget. We know why, none of that's a surprise to anybody. So I took here the FY20 number and the FY21 number as they have sent it to us, which is 7.5%. In conversation with the schools, we have a meeting with all the regional TAs and the superintendent and business manager tomorrow. We'll get more information. So what they told us in their assessment letter is they had a lot to do with the remote learning thing. They didn't have a lot of information from the state, so they just hadn't met yet with the budget, so they sent us the same budget number. That doesn't mean that that's going to stay there. In fact, they told us they know they have to cut. Now, what that means, I don't know. I don't know if that means they're going to cut a little bit or what they're going to do. We also asked for some clarification on FY20 because we know that we're not spending some money but incurring some costs. We'd like to know if they're not incurring some costs, are we going to get that money back? Because that would help us with our free cash.
Right, like transportation, right?
Yes. So, and that's something I should just stop and talk about. So transportation, here's what's going on with transportation. It's a bit of a mess. So the transportation companies, in my opinion, kind of carve up the state anyway. And I have some problems with the way they do their contracting, but those are my own personal things. The transportation companies, some of them stopped paying their employees. Some of them kept their employees whole. So there was everybody was doing different things around the state school committee wise, because for example, in Groton Dunstable, where I live, they weren't paying their employees anymore. So our school committee said, no way are we going to pay those contract costs, even though it is a contract and you're supposed to pay it. If you're not paying your employees, then you're not paying anything really. So we're not going to pay that contract.
Right.
So the federal government told, basically they lose their eligibility for the federal government loan programs if they don't pay their employees. So they all started paying their employees again. So at least we're doing our part, government to government, to make sure that those employees are whole. A lot of school districts are negotiating that contract because there is a lot of overhead costs that are lost, like fuel and transportation. So there should be some type of turn back. I just don't know what the districts is, and they haven't communicated it to us. So transportation is kind of one of those things where every region is negotiating. Some are grouping up and negotiating with these bus companies, but it's all over the place.
Mm-hmm.
But there is an expectation in almost every district that most of the costs will still be paid. But there's also things like food service, custodial,
Yep.
a lot of things that, and electric bills, et cetera. So there should be something to turn back.
Mm-hmm.
What they're going to do with that, are they going to use that to offset next year's assessment? Are they, because it would turn into E&D, right? Are they going to give it back? I don't know. And that's one of the questions we're going to ask tomorrow. And as you notice, I'm pretty conservative. I didn't want to throw any of that in here because I just don't know. But I'm hoping that solves some of our free cash problems or this assessment problem. So here it is. Here's what would happen to the deficit. So just walking through these lines here. So if the school committee reduced their assessment to 76543, okay, and then what our assessment would be, how much that would give us back into our budget calculation, and then what happens to that $260,000 deficit. So if they dropped our assessment down to 3%, which is what I put in my town administrator's budget, then our deficit would shrink to 32,000, which we could cover. Okay, and then the middle ground here, if they came to 5%, then we'd have a $127,000 deficit. So just doing a little exercise for you to see just how big that assessment is in terms of our budget, as you know, and deficit reduction. Okay, so then on the left side here, and this is all information I'm going to present at the public budget hearing on Monday. The police, so each department, I broke it down into major categories: police, fire, DPW, town hall, snow's its own thing, and then liabilities. So the reason why I did that is those budgets are about approximate. So trying to fairly cut or recommend fair cuts across the board so that each department absorbs some of the pain and we don't lose full resident services in all areas. So on the left, this first column is sort of, I don't want to call them light because they're very impactful, but a low, medium, and high impact cut. Okay, so everything in this line is what I'm calling a low cut, because we do know that cuts need to be made. Everything in the middle would have a medium impact on the department, and everything on the right would have a pretty large reduction in resident services. So this, I took all the way down, and I can explain any one of them in detail if you want. So basically what I would tell the department is, you lost 15,000 from your budget request. You tell me where to cut that. And that exercise is already, I've already asked them and they've already been working on it. And then I took town hall, each department gave me their recommendations, and here are the things that we believe, those things in blue that I showed you, that could return some money. Okay, so just so you understand those town hall numbers, the low, the medium, and the high in terms of what we could reduce the expense side on. And then down here, the only good news in any of this is I miscalculated the interest on one of our payments. So that's 5,000 that we can just carve out of the deficit. This is, we did a ban or a refinance on our fire truck, dump truck loan. So we don't have to pay it next year before we do our permanent borrow. We should pay it, but we don't have to pay as much as we were gonna pay, trying to be fiscally responsible. So there's a little bit of wiggle room there. And then health insurance, we have a cushion in our health insurance line. You should have a cushion. We have a one-person cushion, meaning if one person took the highest plan next year because they decided to go on our insurance, we could cover it. That's the cushion. We can cut into that a little bit depending on your tolerance for risk. So on the low end, our town departments could return 40, 60, or 82 if these cuts were something that you wanted to consider. So the last thing that I can tell you, because this is going to come up, is all the employee raises that we put in to include the union contracts that would have to be renegotiated equals $30,000. So union raises plus non-union raises as constructed in my town administrator's budget would be 30,000 on top of these numbers. So looking at the deficit calculator here on the right, if the schools came in at 3% and we did some light cuts, we could solve the deficit, which is good news. If they didn't do anything or just came down to 7%, that leaves a deficit of 22. Even with massive cuts, we can only solve 82 of that. So what would we do in that scenario? You could either cut more, and there's certainly more to cut. It just, I can't explain how bad it would devastate the town. Or you'd use one-time revenues, which is also not a great idea, but you could use more free cash in the budget to try and bridge the gap.
But we weren't projecting a ton of free cash already, though, for 2021, right?
No. So in thinking this through, we also have a stabilization fund, which you shouldn't use, right? The only argument to use those revenues is maybe the economy rebounds and you need to get through this year to get to next year. So it's a rainy day fund and it's raining, right? Maybe you use those funds to bridge the gap. You've never heard me recommend that to you. In fact, I always recommend the other way. I'm not recommending we do that. If we were to do something like that, it should definitely be a hybrid. So if you're going to inject a little bit more, you would also cut too, because you don't want to create, we already have a $100,000 hole in the budget. You don't want to add a ton to it. But I don't know, maybe the town, the Board of Selectmen and you want to bridge this year and get to next year. It's obviously the easiest thing to do, but the least fiscally responsible.
Where are the other towns' heads at regarding their own budgets and the Quabbin assessment?
So I'll know a lot more about that tomorrow. Hardwick couldn't afford any increase.
Right.
They couldn't afford a level funding before COVID.
Right, before this.
So, I mean, I talked to Teresa, she just laughed, at the situation, not in like a negative way. She's
Right.
a super smart person, but what can she do?
Right.
Barry's being much more aggressive with their revenue cuts. They have a little bit bigger of a business base than we do, which means they're going to bring in less than we are. One of my town administrative friends was joking, like one of the benefits of not having business is when business revenue goes down, you don't worry about it, right? So it's not good long-term, but it helps in a situation like this. So that means they're trying to figure out a bigger deficit based off of, them not believing the revenue is going to come in. And then I haven't really talked with OCAM and New Braintree much. That we don't communicate a lot because they don't have town administrators. So but they are sending reps tomorrow to this conversation with the schools, so I'll have some knowledge of what they want to do. But I certainly want this committee to give me some instruction on, do you think the revenues numbers is conservative enough? Do you want to cut them more? Do you want to use one-time revenues? Do you want to slash expenses? You know, do you want to do a 6-month fight with the schools again? These are all things that probably the answer to all of them is yes, but we need to talk about it. So I tried to lay out the picture of where we're at and what I think my best guess is. And I'll say 2 more things before I kind of turn it over to listen is, there's a chance we don't get to do town meeting, which means we're going to a 1/12 budget regardless. If the state allowed us to, and I think they should, and I've asked them to, then we shouldn't have to vote this budget until September. That would be ideal, because then we'd know more and we could make a better guess. So you could look at this as, let's make our best guess at the budget now and fix it in September, because you can always change the budget. It's just, that's harder to do because you got to tell voters why you did X and now you want to do Y. So sure, it's much easier to get it done in June, but the world is so unclear that, time is our friend. The more time we get, the more clarity we get in terms of what's going to happen or what's not going to happen. So the schools might be in that same boat. So they have to vote their budget, but if the state let them not, they might go into a 1/12 anyway, which puts us into a 1/12 by default. And I don't know if I lost everybody there, but we need to understand that too in this process. So there's the money, there's the politics, and then of course there's the mechanics, because none of this has been done before. Usually you don't even have a choice. You have to have everything wrapped up by July 1. The state's saying, we're not sure. We might relax some of those rules. I've learned a lot in the last month. Holy crap.
I'd like to say that the school situation is definitely uncertain because we don't know how the students are going to return to school in the fall. Are they going to go like they are now? Are they going to be on split shifts? Because you can't put them all together like that. So there's too much unknown. And I'm sure you'll learn a lot more tomorrow when they have their meeting.
I don't disagree. Budget-wise, they have to plan like it's a regular year until the state tells them what they're going to do. And they might not know what they're going to do till September. So. Unfortunately, with municipal budgeting, you have to guess. Normally, we have an educated guess, but right now we have to guess while guessing. So.
Why would the school not vote the budget now? Why would they wait and go on 1/12, given the size of the increase that they were looking for?
Because of what Maria said, they don't know expense side what they're looking at. We're renegotiating, or I've been trying to renegotiate all of our contracts to get people to understand that we can't do 2.5%, 3%, 1% increases. Schools are going to do the same thing. They might not have transportation costs, as Maria said, so be a huge difference in their budget, right? So time helps them understand that. If you made them make a decision right now, they're going to tell you, we already told you what we need. So.
Well, that's what I'm thinking. I mean, I don't know if I'm trying to figure out whether or not they want to, they're thinking they want to have that fight now because they would get one, right? But how could they, given what they are looking for, how could they continue on a 1/12 budget from last year, which is what, 5% less than what they're asking for?
You mean their overall or our assessment?
Yeah, overall. I'm not talking about our assessment. I'm talking about their budget. Their budget increase. What's their to like 3.5 or something?
Yeah,
it's 3.5. Yeah.
All right, so 3.5 still. That's a lot of money.
So the superintendent told me that they know they have to cut, and she's pretty honest with me. So I don't think they're going to stay at 3.5%. It's just, I don't know what that means. I don't know if they're going to go to 3.4 or 2.
Well, they certainly can't ask for the maximum in the current situation. And I think they know that.
Agreed. They will tell you that their revenues are likely going to take a hit like ours. So it could be a situation where they say we're not going to spend as much, but we're not going to get as much revenue, so it washes. I don't want to speak for them. I'm just giving you info.
But I'm not seeing a situation right now where any of the member towns are going to vote their budget, vote to approve the school's ask.
I don't either. Not as it's constructed.
So I can see this getting pushed out to the bitter end this year.
Yeah, and then we would have to decide what we're going to do then.
Right.
Well, I think you'll have more information tomorrow after you have your meeting, or better information.
And then the school committee meets on Tuesday virtually, so I plan on going. They're talking about FY20 and FY21 budget, so you're right. We're going to get more information. What I'm really trying to get at, and it doesn't have to be, I'm not looking for an answer or anything, is where your head's at in terms of how you want to approach revenue, expenses, and one-time funds. Those will be keys. There's going to be a deficit no matter what. How do we want to address that deficit? And every town's doing it different. Some people are putting it all in their employees. Some people are slashing. Some people are just saying, this is going to go away. Let's use stabilization. It's all over the place.
How much do we have in stabilization?
The total is just give me one sec. So these are our numbers. We have 415,000 in stabilization, 42 in capital stabilization, and 545,000 in free cash. So remember, the free cash is, in my recommendation to the town administrator's budget, I carved that up into the various things we use free cash for. So some of it, 100 went to the budget, and 300 of it went to purchases, and then 345 went to purchases, which left us with 100,000 in free cash. So there's decisions there too. We built the capital plan in the best of environments. The Board of Selectmen already told me that they want to look at each capital expense to see if it's necessary.
Well, I wouldn't be against using some of the rainy day fund to cover some of the revenue that we're not getting because, as you said earlier, it is raining. But certainly not to help pay for the school expense.
Right. Right.
Yeah. So if I could just, and I've been doing these exercises like crazy. So, so what Chuck's talking about. So in the scenario where they say we're going to do 5%, which I don't think, and again, this is our assessment. They're talking about their whole budget. So we just look at it selfishly from our perspective. So if they drop their budget to a level that gave us a 5% assessment increase, that'd be $127,000 deficit. So if we made major cuts, that's 80,000. You could see a scenario where you'd use 50,000 to plug the gap. There's that type of scenario, which I think is what Chuck's talking about. So you would do both. Instead of covering $127,000 gap, you would cut and cover the gap. I think at 5%, our 5%, the other towns don't vote for that anyway.
Ryan, correct me if I'm wrong, but I thought I remembered too that for us to get only a 5% assessment increase, they almost need to have like a level funded budget based on the numbers. It actually, like, we could still, like, even if they had the same total budget as last year, because of decreased state aid or lack of increase of state aid, it still like trickles down where we still get an increase even if the budget stays completely flat.
Yes.
So in some, I think sometimes what happens is like it's like talking, each side is sort of talking about totally different numbers. You know, like a 5% increase for us may actually not even be a feasible thing in their, for their budget.
Yeah, so I can tell you that our new revenue this year is about $50,000. So if they move up 1%, then we're already spending in the negative, right? So if you just look at it from the municipal side, we wouldn't be level funded, we would be minus to start. So when the schools are saying that your minimum local contribution is X, what they're saying is we're not going to go lower than level. We're way lower than level on the municipal side. So in order to get to 5%, we'd all have to, quote unquote, share the pain. But what I'm telling you is even at 5%, I don't know that the other towns, we definitely can't afford it. I mean, we'd have to use emergency funds. I don't know if the other towns do that either. So I don't like to make things town versus, the schools have an impossible decision to make. It's not, I don't envy them. And we'll say that tomorrow, but we only have so much money and we need to make that clear. You can't print it. So.
We can't run a deficit.
And then, I wanted to mention this too. Another thing other towns have been doing is laying folks off, right? Or furloughing people. So one thing to watch out for is we don't budget anything really for unemployment. So if we did cut folks, which there's a scenario that we do, we don't get the full salary because we have to pay unemployment as well. So it's just something to keep in the back of your mind. If you cut a $100,000 employee, a large chunk of that has to be paid out in unemployment. So the savings isn't one for one. It's like 40% of that total.
My inclination would be to make the fewest cuts possible and go into the stabilization fund. It's not raining, it's pouring. And that's what I think. But what I also think is that once again, because 60 cents of our dollars are going to the school, that's where the action is. And we really need to have that conversation figured out.
Is it possible to hold up on the capital projects and then if things change, have a special town meeting, and when you know your revenues are better, you can request them then?
Yes, for sure.
That's like the most flexible thing, I think.
Let me take you through.
What are the expenses for this year? Because I don't remember.
I do want you to see the warrant too. So this is the draft warrant. Normally I'd hand you a physical copy. So here you go. The first articles you'll recognize are just the housekeeping stuff. The revolving funds, no one's asked to increase their limits or anything, so that's all just boilerplate. Budget, I haven't even tried. One thing that I am recommending this year is that we split out the school stuff into their own articles. So that lesson was learned from last year. It makes it more you don't have to do this. This is up to you and the Board of Selectmen, but it makes it more transparent that you're voting on the school's budget so that people can't say they were confused by the vote.
Okay.
And then that's a straight up or down on the number that you put in there.
Okay.
So then 20,000, this is for PEG Access Fund. Remember, we created their own account that comes from their own money, doesn't impact the town's budget at all. 6,000 in Article 12 here for the master plan chapter.
Yeah.
75. Go ahead.
No, go ahead. Go ahead. I was just-
75,000 for the town center project.
Okay.
And I will say, you don't hear me advocate too strongly for things too often, but this money is necessary to finish that $5 million project in the time to get it on the tip in 22. So you'd be really jeopardizing that project if we didn't do that. So you would have strong opposition from the Board of Selectmen and others. So the Article 14, so this is the capital, this is the bulk of the free cash usage. So the hot box for the DPW, a dump truck for the DPW, a little bit of stuff for the cemetery, the Hubbardston Library Foundation, so this is assessing and repairing, video cameras and storage for the police, the bandstand roof at Curtis Rec, paving the Slade, I just combined two words, paving the Slade building parking lot, and then the new town computers. So these last two are my requests. I would say that we do need to do the hardware and software updates because the computers won't work if we don't do it. But repairing and paving the Slade building parking lot is, that's a want, not a need at this point. It needs it, but it can wait another year. And then a couple big ones for you, and I know we're going to go back to that. Just finishing the Article 15 is the CPA revenues. That's just how that money's estimated. 16 is a big one. It's going to need your commentary. The parks are asking for 200,000 in CPA money to replace Rainbow's End playground equipment. They're going to use 50,000 from, this is again CPA money, so it can only be used for this type of stuff. 50,000 from the general undesignated reserve, and then they're going to borrow 150,000 over no more than 7 years. That'll be a hot topic at town meeting. And then Article 17, a couple of things about this, the center school roof. So this is the debt exclusion override.
Yep.
I got clarification from the MSBA and everybody. This can be pushed off until middle of September. So I'm recommending that we have a early fall town meeting anyway, because I think we're gonna have to fix the budget. But if you don't want to vote on an override in whatever type of election we have in June, this can be pushed. So the Board of Selectmen kind of talked it both ways and said it would be nice to give it 2 shots rather than 1, or is it right to do this right now in the pandemic, right? 2 very reasonable sides of the coin. So so that override would be probably a 20 to 30 year borrow of 1.3 million. So you'd be looking at somewhere between $50 and $100 on the average household every year. And then 18, the Board of Selectmen's recommending that change their name to Select Board. And that's it. That's the whole warrant. Everybody else pulled their articles because they're not even sure we're gonna have a town meeting at this point. So, or that people will go. But I kind of said it the other way. It might be the first time people get to go out. So we might have 1,000 people there. It'll be the first party in town. All right, so you wanted to talk about capital. Put this back up. So this was all stuff vetted by the departments, the Capital Improvement Planning Committee. Definitely you were in favor of it and the Board of Selectmen were in favor of it when the world was normal. So knowing that it's not this is what Maria's talking about. There's some money here, some reserve monies if you wanted to pull some stuff back.
For the bandstand roof, would there be any way of getting like fundraising for that, or like community sponsorship for that, or something that could offset that cost if necessary?
Possibly. Yeah. And, you know, I know a lot about each one of these, so I would tell you that the DPW would prefer the dump truck over the hot box, because right now the dump truck it's replacing may or may not work, and it's on the lift. They need both, but you know, they would prioritize one over the other. The library foundation, we definitely need to assess that. The assessment would be much less than the fix. So the idea here was to assess it and hope that there was enough there to fix it as well, but you might just want to do the assessment. Definitely something to talk to the library about, because they're very strongly in favor of this. And I told you about Slade Building parking lot. So there's a few options there if you want to push them off. And Maria's strategy is one that's people using. You know, you can always bring this stuff back up in the fall.
Well, you already said we could, the paving could wait. Probably have to do some patching, but if you put that off, that would make sense. Of course, having a new hot box would make the patching go easier, but.
And just along those funny lines, the extra material we were going to purchase to put in that hot box would be one of the first things we cut. So.
Yeah.
Okay, good. What if we put everything off except for your new computers and hardware? Pushed everything out to September except for that.
That's what I'm here to ask you.
I'm floating that to everyone in the meeting.
So that would give us like 230.
Mm-hmm.
That was actually that'd almost be right at where we were sort of the deficit that we were looking at.
Mm-hmm.
Just a reminder that if you use all reserves, you're going to have the same problem in 22. And I know no one wants to talk about 22, but that's my job. So
No,
you
I
can't.
Right, that's why you have this instead of the reserves.
Right.
I think the townspeople would understand that. Now, the bandstand roof, could that be done with CPA money?
It's this was put on by the Parks Department.
Okay, I don't know what the CPA money exactly.
That's a good question, though. That's a really good.
Yeah.
It was talked about in that way. The application just, I don't know why it didn't go in. It didn't go in though. They never considered it.
Okay, well, if you take it off of here, they might consider it. I think people would understand this where, you know, later on in the year, if things get better and your revenues increase, then you can definitely ask for this.
The only thing I would just say in defense of the dump truck and the hot box is we have really hit the DPW. I think last year we took away all their, you know, extra funding and so forth. So I feel like we got to give them something.
Well, we did give them the truck last year.
Oh, that's true. That's true.
How serious is the library foundation problem? Like, is that something that if we do take that off the table and put it off, that we're going to create a bigger problem for ourselves?
Yeah, is it causing leaks or other issues inside?
Yes. All those answers.
Well, you
Right,
could
right.
request the assessment and then you would have a better idea of what it would cost to repair it and ask for that later.
Yep.
Yep.
So I'll tell you the reason why our 5-year capital plan is so big is because we always put things off. When I say we, I mean historically the town.
Right.
There's always a reason to. This one's a really good reason to.
Yeah.
But the each department would tell you that what they've asked for, because a lot of projects didn't make it on here, right? So what they've asked for is necessary. Like the police chief would tell you that the video camera and storage is a huge liability, and he needs that. The bandstand roof is failing, of course. I told you the computers, I just happened to be here, so you heard me say that. And I told you a little bit of Travis's thinking. And then the library would argue for the same thing. So none of these are good decisions. It's putting it all off, of course. I would argue that they should happen because we need them. And I would also argue with Maria that this is a good time to not be spending flexible money. So
Right. So in a way, you could say your stabilization money would go to fund this.
yes.
Yeah.
Or you can do some capital, or you could just say you're going to readdress it in September. Maybe the world's better, maybe it's worse. I don't know. It's probably going to be about the same.
It's going to be better.
We'll know a fraction of a percentage more than we know today.
Yeah.
We need it to be better.
Yeah, one of the things we keep talking about is whether or not, and Josh, you know some of these things as well, whether or not there's going to be a quote unquote second wave. So who knows what that would do to the economy. It wouldn't be good.
Well, when does flu season start? Isn't that November?
Like October.
Yeah, I was gonna
October?
say fall.
Yeah, so as long as we squeak it out by September, we'll be good. I see.
Get the budget in first.
That's right. That's right. And then we'll hold our nose and see what happens. I don't have any good thoughts because I want to know what the school is going to do.
So I would say you should schedule a meeting either next week or the week after. The public budget hearing is Monday. So maybe people will weigh in on this. You might get some public, that's what it's for. The public's supposed to weigh in. The selectmen will definitely weigh in more. Not asking you to make answers. I'm really just giving you info
Yeah.
Mhm.
There's
to
so
arm
many
your decision
variables.
making.
There's just so many variables and I want a couple more shoes to drop.
Okay, meeting next week.
Okay. All right, Tuesday or Thursday, right?
Well, you said the school board is meeting Tuesday?
Yeah, I'd like to go to that.
Okay, so then we should meet week from today, right?
Yep.
Okay.
Right, everybody good?
Yeah, I won't be able to make that meeting, but yeah, I mean, you guys will have a quorum anyway, so
You want to meet on, well, all right. Now you and Ryan can fight over whether or not we should meet on Friday then. Are you available on Friday or Wednesday?
no, I could do Monday, Tuesday, or Wednesday, but I can't do Thursday or Friday.
Okay. Well, what time is the Tuesday meeting? Is that in the evening, Ryan, for the school?
It is 6:30.
We could do, what about Wednesday then, the day after, the 6th?
You do Wednesday, Ryan?
I have 3 meetings on, this would be my 3rd on Wednesday. So
Okay.
I told the planning board I'd go to their meeting at 6:30.
What if we met on Thursday at a different,
I work 4 to
Different
midnight.
I can make Wednesday work as long as it's a later meeting. 7:30.
7:30 is okay with me.
Yeah, that's fine with me.
Is that all right? Everybody else, we're good?
Yeah, I can do it.
Yes.
Okay. Okay, so next meeting will be Wednesday at 7:30. Okay, I'll put the notice. Okay.
Great.
All right, any other business?
I don't have anything.
All right, we're all good, right?
I think so.
Okay, good. All right. So how about a motion to adjourn?
I'll make a motion.
Oh, but before we adjourn, you may all wish me a happy birthday.
Oh,
Happy birthday.
put that in the minutes.
Yes, I am. Yes, I
I'm
am.
s- getting a screenshot and I'm putting that on the town Facebook.
Did you do anything special?
Yeah, I did this.
Yay.
Yeah, and I'm gonna have a couple glasses of wine when we're all done here. I spared you that.
Yeah, have more than two.
Right.
Well, I just might.
Happy birthday, Susan.
Thank you. Thank you. All right, so we have a motion to adjourn by Chuck, was that you?
Yes, that was me.
All right, who's the second?
I'll second that. It's Shannon.
Thank you. All right, roll call, all in favor. I vote yes.
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 Yes.